We talked earlier a little bit about the money supply, credit growth. Credit growth, we saw mortgages ease again, not much growth there, but the unsecured credit is where the growth is actually happening.
Yes, Mia. On a year-on-year basis, at least, unsecured credit continues to grow at a strong pace. You saw that, but I mean, quite surprisingly, over the last 2 months, we've seen some kind of moderation in terms of the month-on-month numbers. Yes, the year-on-year numbers are still high on the back of the base effect from the previous year, but on the month-on-month side, this is the second consecutive month where the other credit extension subcomponent that the Reserve Bank reports actually declined.
Yeah, and we also saw that consumer credit and corporate credit improved there. People spending more on their credit cards.
Yeah, that's fair enough. On the consumer side, I think it's quite a wide variety of things. The first thing is that coming out of last year, household disposable incomes continue to increase. That's likely to come off, we feel, in the second half of the year a little bit more aggressively, and that should actually weigh on household credit growth especially.
Okay, and then just mortgages. We saw this whole story with ABSA coming out, very negative for their share price and saying that their earnings will decrease by more than 10%. And that is because of mortgages they have actually granted to people who's not able to pay them. Are we going to see any growth in that sector coming through?
I think that mortgage NPLs in the banking sector are still elevated, obviously. I mean, it's a system-wide problem, but ABSA is particularly affected by it, given their predominance in that particular sector of the market. I don't think it's going to cause massive write-downs in the banking sector, but as a matter of course, ABSA has a loan-to-deposit ratio of 100%, and given that underlying condition, and given the lack of consumer confidence, especially, we don't see mortgage credit improving drastically anytime soon, so especially given...
This is rather an ABSA problem then than a broader sector problem for our banks in South Africa?
Well, the other banks do have a slight problem, but obviously ABSA is the problem is more heavily weighted within the ABSA loan book.
Let's take a look at the money supply. We saw that money supply is up to 6.45% year-on-year in May from 6.2 in April, but still marginally lower than the average growth of 14.2 that we're used to. That's on the back of the weaker economy, right?
Absolutely. I mean, really, as you mentioned, both the corporate sector and the household sector are pulling back quite significantly in terms of both consumption and investment growth. You saw that last week in the Reserve Bank's releases. I mean, their data releases that they had last week. That investment growth has actually slowed quite dramatically, as well as consumption growth, both by the private sector and the state sector. And I mean, with an environment like that, it's only natural that money supply growth will taper off.
Now, we saw producer inflation stay steady in May, even though it was expected by the market that it would come in lower than it was. Commodity prices has actually slowed for the last month or so. We saw petrol coming in also going to be a little cheaper from next week, nearly by R1 per litre, which is an extensive decrease in that price. But that hasn't actually come through yet to the producer inflation. What's your expectation around that point?
We expect the producer inflation to continue to decline going into the second half of the year. This particular month it was unchanged, but remember that since late last year, it's actually come off quite significantly. So and given that, I mean, the first reason that you could arguably prevented a decline in this month was, remember that this is when the rand specifically deteriorated quite dramatically. As Samantha mentioned, the rand improved 4% this month. And given that stabilization, expect that producer prices should continue to decline, given that commodity prices are also still weaker.
Thanks, Waseem. That was Waseem Thokan, economist at Legae Securities.